Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is where we take the sources you send us and, well, really dig into them for the most fascinating insights. Today, we're plunging into a topic that's part strategy, part psychology, and increasingly part artificial intelligence.
That's right.
Deception and tells, specifically in the world of poker.
Yeah, and you're looking to get a solid grasp of this kind of complex area quickly, thoroughly.
Without getting bogged down.
Exactly, without all the jargon. So consider this your shortcut, to understanding that intriguing collision of human intuition and, well, AI logic right there at the poker table.
And our main source for this, our sort of bedrock, it's a great piece called The Algorithmic Gaze, Poker, Deception, and AI.
Good stuff.
Yeah, it's going to be our compass as we navigate this. Now, poker, it's more than just cards, isn't it?
Oh, definitely.
It's almost like a perfect little laboratory.
Yeah.
A microcosm, maybe?
For studying how we make decisions when we don't have all the facts.
Yeah, decision-making under uncertainty. And strategy, too. And let's be honest, how we try to outwit each other.
Yeah.
That psychological warfare aspect.
Right. Incomplete information and a bit of well-placed deception. They're practically baked into the rules.
So the first key insight here is really that poker gives us this concentrated environment, right? To see how strategy, hidden info, and yeah, even that psychological warfare stuff plays out.
Absolutely. And what's really interesting is that deception, it's not just some, quirky human invention. No, it's fundamental. It's biological. You see it across so many species. Animals using camouflage, right? Mimicking calls.
To hide or to hunt.
Exactly. It's an evolutionary strategy. Survival, getting ahead. So deep down, deception is this widespread tactic in nature for gaining an edge.
Okay, so it's not just us being sneaky then. It's deep-rooted.
Definitely.
And it pops up all through human history too, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I'm thinking like military tactics, politics.
Precisely. Military doctrine, for instance, has used deception for ages. It's seen as a crucial force multiplier. It's been a strategic tool in human conflict forever, which really speaks to how effective it can be. And even when you look at how we develop as individuals, the ability to deceive actually shows up pretty early. Around the same time, kids start developing what psychologists call theory of mind.
Theory of mind, okay, refresh me. That's the understanding that other people have their own thoughts, feelings, beliefs, even if they're different from mine.
Exactly that. Think of it like this. You have the classic Sally Ann test. Sally puts her marble in a basket, then leaves.
Okay.
Ann comes in, moves the marble to a box. When Sally comes back, where will she look for the marble?
Well, she'd look in the basket because she doesn't know Ann moved it.
Right. Understanding that Sally holds a false belief based on her perspective, that's a key sign of theory of mind. And it's crucial for both pulling off deception and spotting it.
Interesting. So kids who are better at that.
Well, some studies suggest kids who are better at controlling their expressions, keeping a poker face, tend to be more successful liars.
Okay, now here's where it gets really interesting for me. All this trickery, it actually takes effort, right? It's not the easy way out.
That's absolutely right. Neuroscience shows that lying is actually more cognitively demanding. It takes more brain power than telling the truth.
Why is that?
Well, you have to actively suppress the truth first off. Then you have to construct a believable false story and maintain it. This really lights up the prefrontal cortex, the brain's sort of executive control center.
Oh, okay.
And this extra mental effort, sometimes it leaks out in subtle ways, those very tells we're going to talk about.
Gotcha. So the key takeaway there is lying is hard work for the brain. And that extra effort can actually create signals, these unconscious giveaways.
Precisely.
Okay, let's unpack this more in the poker context. So poker, with all the hidden cards, the guessing, it becomes this incredible stage for all that psychological maneuvering.
Exactly. It's not just about having the best hand, is it?
No, not at all. It feels like it's about telling the most convincing story sometimes.
That's the perfect way to put it. Success really hinges on crafting and projecting a believable narrative about your hand, even if it's, completely made up. That's bluffing in a nutshell.
Right.
And because of this constant need to deceive and also to detect deception, the whole concept of tells becomes just crucial.
Tells, okay, so these are the little giveaways, the twitch, the shaky hand, that kind of thing.
Exactly. Those subtle behavioral cues that can betray the hidden information a player's trying to keep under wraps.
And they could be different types.
Yeah, you can categorize them. Physical tells body language, how they handle chips. Verbal tells what they actually say, their tone of voice, and even their betting patterns, the size, the timing of their bets.
Okay. And what about that classic poker saying, weakness means strength and strength means weakness? Is there actually anything to that?
It's a very common heuristic, yeah. And sometimes it holds true. The idea is like a player acting weak might have a monster hand trying to lure you in.
Yeah.
While someone acting really strong, being aggressive, might be trying to scare you off a bluff.
Why? It's not foolproof.
Oh, definitely not. It's just a general guideline. You absolutely cannot rely on it blindly. Context is king. And the individual player matters hugely. What's a tell for one person isn't for another.
Right. So context is key. Don't just apply blanket rules.
Exactly.
So these tells, are they always unconscious slips? Like you can't help it? Or can players actually use them deliberately?
It can absolutely be both. Some tells are just that unconscious leakage, nerves, excitement bubbling up.
Yeah.
But experienced players, they definitely use false tells. They'll deliberately act a certain way, maybe pretend to be nervous when they're strong, specifically to mislead you.
The mind games.
Exactly.
Right.
And as players get more sophisticated, you get this fascinating sort of arms race, right? Trying to spot tells, control your own fake tells. It involves some serious mental gymnastics, recursive thinking.
Okay, now, sitting at that table, trying to figure all this out, you're constantly making decisions with incomplete information. How does the human brain even handle that uncertainty?
Well, poker really puts your risk assessment skills to the absolute test. You're constantly crunching probabilities, even if subconsciously.
Like the chance my hand wins, what they might have. Can I draw the card I need?
All of that. And emotions play a huge role here. Think about tilt.
Oh, yeah. Everyone knows tilt. That frustration, anger, that just makes you play terribly.
Exactly. It completely derails rational play. It's the polar opposite of what good, experienced players strive for, which is emotional stability. So managing your emotions is honestly just as important as understanding the odds.
We've all felt that bad beat send us spiraling, right?
Sure. And it's interesting, neuroeconomic studies using fMRI brain scans have actually shown how wins and losses affect our risk-taking. Yeah. You see different patterns of brain activity in frequent players compared to, say, non-gamblers, especially in areas linked to reward processing and decision-making, particularly after taking a loss.
So experience can actually change how your brain responds.
It seems that way. Experience with the game might reshape how our brains handle risk and reward, potentially leading to more stable play over time.
What's fascinating here is it's not just about your cards or even your own head. You're constantly trying to figure out everyone else.
Opponent modeling, absolutely crucial skill.
So what does that involve?
It's about spotting patterns in how your opponents play, their betting habits, how often they seem to bluff, how they react under pressure, and then, crucially, adjusting your strategy to exploit those patterns.
And this links back to that theory of mind thing again.
Deeply connected. You're actively trying to infer what your opponent is thinking, what they intend to do based on their actions, their bets, maybe even their tells.
It's like that multi-level thinking. What do they think I have? What do they think I think they have?
Precisely. That's the recursive thinking loop that makes high-level poker so complex and, well, mentally taxing.
But even the best players, they're not perfect robots, right? They must fall into mental traps sometimes.
Oh, absolutely. Even the most seasoned pros aren't immune to cognitive biases. These are like systematic errors in our thinking that can lead us to make less than optimal decisions.
So even if you know the math, your own brain can trip you up.
Exactly. You need to be aware that your brain has these built-in shortcuts, and they can be easily exploited at the poker table if you're not careful.
Okay, give us some examples. What kind of biases are we talking about?
Well, there's a whole list. Confirmation bias is a big one. You only pay attention to stuff that confirms what you already believe about an opponent or the situation.
Right, ignoring evidence to the contrary.
Exactly. Then there's overconfidence, especially after a winning streak. You start playing too loose, thinking you can't lose.
Been there.
The anchoring effect, getting stuck on your first impression of a player and not updating it even when they show you something different. The gambler's fallacy, thinking past random events influence future ones, like, I've lost 5 hands in a row, I'm due for a win. Which isn't true, statistically.
Yeah, the cards don't remember.
You're right. Loss aversion, the pain of losing feels stronger than the pleasure of an equal gain, so you might play too scared, fold too often.
Mm-hmm.
Sunk cost fallacy, that urge to keep putting money into a pot just because you've already invested some, even if the odds now stink.
Chasing losses?
Basically. And hindsight bias after the hand is over, feeling like, oh, I knew they had that all along, even if you didn't really.
Wow, okay, that's a minefield of potential mental errors.
Yeah.
And you're saying even pros fall for this stuff.
Absolutely. Expertise doesn't make you immune. Sometimes it can even reinforce certain biases if you're not actively self-aware. The key is knowing these pitfalls exist and constantly questioning your own thinking.
Which brings us back to tells again, because these biases might actually cause tells.
They can be linked, yeah. Tells are often the outward sign of these inner psychological states, these biases at work. Understanding the biases can help you interpret tells or spot when an opponent might be making a decision based on flawed thinking.
Okay, so let's get concrete then.
Yeah.
Physical tells. What kinds of things should people actually look for at a live poker table?
Well, the source material gives some good examples. Defensive movements, like instinctively reaching for chips when someone bets into you, often signals weakness, like they're trying to subconsciously ward off the bet.
Interesting. Counterintuitive almost.
It can be. Hesitations before making a big bet, on the other hand, can sometimes indicate strength. Someone bluffing usually wants to appear decisive, quick.
Okay.
Double-checking whole cards before acting can suggest weakness or uncertainty, but doing it after making a big bet, that might show relaxation, confidence, like, I've got it.
All right.
Quick calls often mean a drawing hand or a medium strength hand they're not sure about raising with. Shaking hands, that can be genuine nervous excitement from a very strong hand.
But you said earlier, context is king.
Absolutely crucial.
Yeah.
You have to establish a baseline for each player, what's normal for them. A normally stoic player suddenly getting fidgety is way more significant than someone who's always fidgety.
Right. Look for the deviations from their norm.
Exactly. And often that very first fleeting reaction, the micro-expression or initial movement, is the most genuine tell before they put their poker face back on.
Okay, fascinating stuff. What about verbal tells? What people say.
Oh yeah, that can be revealing too. Classic example. Weak hand statements combined with strong action, like a big bet.
Like saying, I guess I'll call, but then raising huge.
Sort of, or saying something like, I'm probably just on a draw here, while pushing in a mountain of chips. They're often trying to downplay a monster hand.
Trying to sound uncertain when they're actually very strong.
Exactly. Goading behavior can also signal strength, saying stuff like, I dare you to call after betting big. If they were bluffing, they probably wouldn't want to encourage a call, right?
Okay.
Even just the quality of speech. Is it smooth, natural, confident? That often correlates with strength. Is it forced, hesitant, shaky? Maybe weakness or a bluff. Experts like Zachary Elwood really stress timing and context for verbal cues, too.
So, again, it's not just what they say, but how they say it and when in the flow of the hand.
Precisely. And then, perhaps the most reliable source of information, betting patterns.
Why are they considered so reliable?
Well, because they're concrete actions within the game's structure. They're less subjective than trying to read a twitch, you know?
Hard data, almost.
Kind of. A significant deviation from a player's established betting pattern is a huge signal. It often indicates either an unusually strong hand or a bluff.
So if a super tight player suddenly makes a massive raise,
You sit up and pay attention, big time. Conversely, if a player who's usually betting and raising suddenly just checks or calls passively, that might indicate weakness or that they're trapping.
and this is where data and AI can really come in, especially online.
Absolutely. Online, AI can analyze betting patterns, timing data, bet size and consistency across thousands of hands to spot anomalies that humans might miss. It's very powerful for detecting things like collusion or bot use, too.
But again, even with betting patterns,
You need that baseline. You have to know what's normal for that player before you can reliably interpret a deviation. But yeah, betting patterns often give you the most solid clues.
okay, now let's talk about the act of deception itself.
Hmm.
Bluffing. It's sort of the heart of the psychological game, isn't it?
It really is. Bluffing is core strategic deception, betting strong with a weak hand, trying to make better hands fold.
And the opposite, slow playing.
Yeah, that's deception too. Acting weak or passive with a monster hand to try and trap opponents and get more money in the pot.
So what makes a bluff successful? Can't just be random betting.
No, definitely not. Successful bluffing is it's a mix. You need good observation of your opponents. You need to tell a consistent story with your betting actions throughout the hand.
The narrative again.
Exactly. The timing has to be right. You need to project confidence, even if you're faking it. And you need good risk management, knowing when the potential reward justifies the risk. Game theory can even help calculate mathematically optimal bluffing frequencies.
So a good bluff really is like acting. selling that story.
Absolutely. You're creating a coherent, believable narrative that just happens to be false.
And how does emotion play into executing a bluff or spotting one? You mentioned tilt earlier.
Oh, it's huge. A player's emotional state, particularly if they're on tilt, massively impacts both their ability to bluff effectively and their ability to interpret tells or resist being bluffed.
How so?
Tilt just impairs your cognitive function. Your thinking gets cloudy, you make rash decisions, and often your tells become much more pronounced, much less controlled. You leak information everywhere.
Whereas experienced players
tend to have much better emotional regulation. They can detach, make rational decisions even under pressure. And that's a skill, by the way. It can be learned and practiced. Emotional control is just fundamental to both bluffing well and not getting exploited yourself.
And drilling down even further on a neurological level, what's happening when we deceive or detect lies?
Well, as we touched on, the prefrontal cortex is doing a lot of the heavy lifting for deception planning, inhibiting the truth. But the limbic system, especially the amygdala, is involved in the emotional side, feelings of guilt or anxiety about lying.
Although you said that can fade.
Yeah, interestingly, research suggests the emotional cost of lying might decrease with repetition, like the brain adapts. But generally, deception requires more cognitive control, more neural connectivity. And interpreting tells, especially those subtle nonverbal ones, involves the brain decoding those faint emotional signals.
Okay, so humans have been playing these deception games for ages. But now there's a totally new player at the table, AI.
Yep. Artificial intelligence has entered the chat, so to speak.
How did that happen? What's AI's journey in poker been like?
It's been fascinating. Early attempts were, pretty basic, trying to program rules, maybe mimic human thought processes a bit. But the big breakthroughs came more recently.
With systems like DeepStack, Libratus.
Exactly. Pluribus, too. These AIs achieved superhuman performance, beating top human pros. And what's really remarkable is how they did it.
Not by thinking like us.
Mostly not, no. They primarily use incredibly powerful mathematical and computational techniques to approximate what's called game theoretically optimal strategy, GTO.
Right, GTO. That unexploitable style of play. Explain that a bit more.
Sure. So in poker, you basically have two main strategic approaches. GTO, game theory optimal, aims for a strategy that's so mathematically balanced it can't be consistently beaten in the long run, even if your opponent knows exactly how you play.
It's like a perfect defense.
Kind of. The other approach is exploitative play, where you actively try to identify and capitalize on your specific opponent's weaknesses or mistakes.
So GTO is safe, but maybe misses opportunities. Exploitative is riskier but potentially more profitable against weaker players.
That's the core tension, exactly. Poker solvers, these powerful software tools, help players figure out GTO lines. For AI, the dilemma is play safe GTO or try to exploit, which opens you up to being counter-exploited if you misread the opponent.
So how do these AIs actually learn these incredibly complex GTO strategies? The game is huge.
The main algorithm, the workhorse, is called counterfactual regret minimization, or CFR.
Okay, sounds complex.
The concept is kind of cool, though. Basically, the AI plays against itself over and over, billions, trillions of hands. After each hand, it looks back at the decisions it made and calculates the regret it has for not choosing a different action. How much more would I have won on average if I'd bet instead of checked there?
Okay, learning from mistakes, but mathematically.
Precisely. It adjusts its strategy iteratively to minimize that total regret over time. And eventually, it converges towards a Nash equilibrium, that GTO state where neither player can improve by changing strategy alone.
But poker has so many possibilities.
It does. So CFR often operates on abstracted versions of the game, simplifying the possible hands, bet sizes to make the computation feasible.
And deep learning. Neural networks, where do they fit in?
They've been crucial too. DeepStack, for example, used deep learning to develop a kind of intuition. It learned an evaluation function that could quickly estimate the value of being in a certain situation in the game without having to search billions of future steps.
So it could make decisions faster, more like a human gut feeling, but based on massive data.
Kind of, yeah. It's often a synergy learned knowledge from deep learning or CFR combined with powerful real-time search capabilities that makes these top AIs so strong.
Okay, so AI can master the math, the GTO. But what about the human side? Can AI model opponents? Read tells, understand psychology.
That's the next frontier, really. AI approaches opponent modeling in a couple of ways. Some use implicit modeling. Their GTO strategy is just inherently robust against most opponents.
But others try to learn specifically.
Right. Explicit modeling. They actively try to learn about individual opponents during play. Bayesian methods are often used here. The AI starts with some general assumptions about how opponents play, and then updates those beliefs based on the actions it actually observes from a specific player. Okay, this player seems to bluff more often than average on the river, that kind of thing.
And what about theory of mind? Can an AI actually, understand what an opponent might be thinking or believing?
That's a super interesting question right now. Large language models, LLMs, have shown some surprising abilities on tasks that seem to require a theory of mind, like understanding false beliefs in simple story scenarios.
Like the Sally Ann test.
Yeah, variations of that. But there seems to be a difference between what some call explicit Tom, knowing about mental states, and applied Tom, actually using that understanding to accurately predict complex behavior. LLMs still have limitations there in really dynamic situations.
So they might pass a test, but not necessarily apply it effectively in a real game.
Potentially, but there are new approaches being developed, like something called opponent modeling with in-context search, that are trying to build in more reasoning about an opponent's likely thought process before the AI chooses its own move. It's moving in that direction.
So let's get practical. Can AI detect human tells, that nervous fidget, the eye twitch we talked about?
Big difference between online and live play here.
Okay.
Online, AI is actually very good at analyzing digital footprints, betting patterns, timing between actions, bet size and consistency. It can spot statistical anomalies that might indicate bluffing, strength, or even cheating, like collusion or bot use. There's an ongoing arms race there between detection and evasion.
Well, live tells, physical stuff.
Much, much harder for AI. Human tells are incredibly nuanced, highly context-dependent, and vary wildly from person to person.
Yeah.
While AI can analyze facial expressions or voice patterns, in theory, reliably integrating that into real-time poker decisions against a diverse table of humans, that's a massive challenge right now. The sheer subtlety and individuality is hard to codify.
So AI isn't reading your soul across the table just yet.
Not in that sense, no. We might see more hybrid systems, though maybe a human player getting AI assistance with strategy or analysis while still relying on their own intuition for live tells. But purely AI reading live tells effectively still seems a way off.
Okay. What about the other side? Can AI generate deception? Can AI bluff effectively?
Oh, absolutely. Bluffing is a mathematically necessary component of a balanced GTO strategy. So top AIs like Libratus and Pluribus, they bluff a lot and effectively.
Or does it bluffing in the human sense? Like trying to manipulate psychologically?
Generally, no, not in current systems, unless specifically programmed for it. Their bluffing is driven by strategic and probabilistic calculations. In this spot, given the board and stack sizes, bluffing with this part of my range has the highest expected value. It's math, not malice.
But it still achieves the goal of deception.
Functionally, yes. AI can also generate strategic unpredictability by varying its play, sometimes getting, sometimes checking with the same hand, which makes it very hard for humans to model or get a read on.
Could it fake tells online? Like deliberately pause before betting?
Potentially, yeah. Manipulating bet timing or using unusual bet sizes online could certainly be used to create false impressions. So you could define AI deception functionally. Any action that systematically causes a false belief in an opponent to achieve a goal, even without conscious intent.
This opens up some really deep questions about AI and human psychology interacting. Could AI learn to exploit our known cognitive biases?
It's a very real possibility, and research is exploring this. An AI could potentially learn to recognize patterns indicative of, say, tilt or the sunk cost fallacy in a human opponent.
And then target that weakness.
Exactly. If it detects you're likely tilted, it might apply more pressure. If it thinks you're prone to sunk cost, it might make bigger river bets knowing you'll feel compelled to call. An AI combining GTO with sophisticated modeling of human psychological vulnerabilities could be incredibly powerful.
Which raises some ethical questions, doesn't it?
Huge ethical questions.
So,
about fairness, manipulation. We'll definitely touch on those.
Before we get to ethics, how do tells actually fit into the calculus of poker? The math side.
They're inputs, essentially. You have the hard math, pot odds, implied odds, hand frequencies, expected value calculations. You have logical deductions based on game theory and constructing ranges of possible hands for your opponent. Tells provide extra information, maybe unreliable, maybe noisy, but potentially valuable information that helps you narrow down that range of hands your opponent might have. The fundamental theorem of poker basically says you win when you play like you can see their cards. Tells give you a tiny blurry peek behind that curtain.
So they help you make slightly more informed decisions against their likely holdings.
That's the idea.
This really does touch on some philosophical stuff, too. The nature of truth, deception. What does it even mean for an AI to deceive if it doesn't have intent like a human?
Absolutely. Human deception is tangled up with consciousness, intent, understanding truth versus falsehood. Current AI lacks that in the human sense. Its bluff is an output of its programming, its optimization function.
So is it really deception?
Depends on your definition. Philosophers like Kant would argue deception requires intent. Others, looking functionally, might say if it systematically induces a false belief to achieve a goal, then functionally it's deception. As AI gets more sophisticated, it really pushes on these definitions.
And how does dealing with all this, trying to read tells, being bluffed, maybe suspecting an AI, affect the human players themselves, their mindset?
Massively. Successfully reading a tell feels great, builds confidence. Getting bluffed badly can trigger frustration, doubt, tilt. Your own emotional state directly influences the tells you give off and your ability to accurately read others. And your beliefs about tells can create biases, like confirmation bias, seeing tells that confirm what you want to believe.
It's not just individual psychology either, is it? There are social, even cultural layers here.
Definitely. Nonverbal cues, how they're expressed and interpreted, can vary a lot across cultures. Eye contact norms, gestures. What signifies strength or weakness in one culture might be totally different elsewhere. That adds complexity, especially in diverse international games.
Needs cultural sensitivity.
For sure. And the live poker table itself is a social arena. Tells, table talk, image management, they're all part of the interpersonal dynamics, how players interact, the reputation they build. It's very different from the relative anonymity of online poker.
Okay, so pulling this all together, this deep dive into deception, tells, poker, and now AI. It really highlights the sheer complexity of, well, the human mind and strategic interaction.
It really does.
And while AI has become this incredible force in the math and strategy side,
Superhuman in many cases.
its current grasp and use of the human psychological layer, the tells, the biases, it's still quite different from how humans operate in that space.
Yeah, the approach is different. AI is often mathematically superior, relying on GTO and pattern recognition, but it doesn't yet navigate the psychological nuances like a human does. Though, as we said, that gap might be narrowing.
Which brings us to a final thought for you, our listener, to chew on. Given AI's increasing sophistication in these complex strategic environments, what does that mean for the future of human expertise and intuition?
Yeah, not just in games like poker.
Right, but in other fields too. Anyway, deception, reading subtle cues, understanding hidden intentions plays a role. Negotiation, intelligence analysis, maybe even interpersonal relationships.
It's a big question. What's the role of human intuition when AI gets really good at strategy and pattern recognition, maybe even psychological modeling?
Something to really consider. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope it gave you some insights.
Yeah, definitely encourage you to explore more. The psychology of poker is fascinating, game theory, the ethics of AI, lots to dig into.
This is DigitView.